Hi, automotive enthusiasts. Welcome to Auto Archv, where today we're taking a long and fascinating journey into the story of a motorcycle that didn't just carry riders across the map, but changed the very way people thought about travel on two wheels. We're talking about the Honda Goldwing GL1000, launched in 1975, a machine that many still point to as the turning point in modern motorcycle touring. On the surface, it was simply another entry in Honda's ever-expanding lineup, but once you dig into the choices behind its design and the ripple effects that followed, you realize this wasn't just a product release, it was a cultural shift. By the early 70s, the American motorcycle landscape had already gone through massive transformations. Harley-Davidson held onto its throne as the builder of heavy touring bikes. BMW had earned a reputation for long-distance reliability, and Japanese brands were mostly thought of as the nimble newcomers offering lightweight alternatives. Into this mix, Honda introduced something totally unexpected: a 999cc, flat-4, water-cooled machine with shaft drive and a focus not on speed records or stripped-down minimalism, but on comfort, smoothness, and the ability to eat up miles with confidence. The launch of the Goldwing raised eyebrows because it didn't seem to fit Honda's previous trajectory. This was the company known for opening doors to first-time riders with small, approachable bikes, or dazzling the performance world with fast inline fours. Suddenly, they dropped a heavyweight motorcycle aimed at American touring enthusiasts, a group that was seen as fiercely loyal to tradition. The question wasn't just whether riders would buy it, but whether they would even see Honda as a legitimate presence in this space. And yet, Honda was calculating something bigger. They saw the growing appetite in America for road trips, the cultural romance of the interstate, and the opportunity to merge motorcycle freedom with car-like comfort. The Goldwing GL1000 was built around this insight, and in doing so, Honda set in motion a whole new category. Over the course of this video, we'll explore how the Goldwing's design broke with convention, how riders reacted once they put serious miles on it, and how its influence still resonates across the touring world. We'll uncover the engineering, decisions that made it so different, the stories of people who embraced it in the early years, and the way it redefined not only Honda's identity, but the broader culture of motorcycling. So settle in, because this is the story of how one motorcycle turned the open road into a completely new experience, and why the first-generation Goldwing remains one of the most important bikes ever built. By the end, you'll see how a single model shifted expectations, reshaped rivalries, and created a legacy that still rolls strong today. The Honda Goldwing GL1000 arrived into a motorcycle world that was at a crossroads. On one side stood decades of tradition, where touring meant heavy, air-cooled V-twins or European boxers, and on the other was a wave of Japanese innovation pushing boundaries of what riders expected from machines. Honda had already proven with the CB750 that they could disrupt markets, but the GL1000 took that logic in a new direction. Designed not for quarter-mile runs or sporty handling, but for comfort and long-distance confidence. Its creators studied the American landscape, where wide highways demanded something more than just raw power. They needed smoothness, durability, and ease of maintenance over thousands of miles. The result was a motorcycle that looked and felt unlike anything before it, sparking curiosity, skepticism, and ultimately admiration. And that was just the beginning, because the GL1000 wasn't a simple evolution. It was a revolution in disguise, waiting to prove itself in the hands of real riders. Micro story. When the Goldwing prototype was first being tested, Honda engineers rode it across Japan in long endurance sessions, chasing the kind of reliability that would hold up in the United States. They deliberately targeted the sort of highway riding Americans took for granted, something rarely found in Japan at the time. Stories from those tests describe how engineers obsessed over temperature stability, keeping the flat-4 engine running smoothly no matter the conditions. That effort paid off, because when the bike reached the US, riders found themselves able to cruise mile after mile without the mechanical fatigue that often haunted other machines. Micro story. Early. Reactions from dealerships were mixed. Some traditionalists wondered if the Goldwing's automotive-like features made it too refined to appeal to purists. Yet younger riders, and even car owners considering their first motorcycle, were intrigued by the promise of a bike that could make long trips less daunting. One rider described the sensation of rolling onto an interstate and realizing he no longer had to fight against vibration or overheating, and that comfort alone changed his perception of what motorcycles could do. The GL1000 gave him confidence to ride cross-country, something he never thought he would attempt before. Context digest. In the 1970s, long-distance touring was associated with big air-cooled twins that required regular attention on the road. Oil leaks, vibration fatigue, and overheating were accepted as part of the experience. Honda's decision to use liquid cooling in the Goldwing wasn't just about performance, it was about eliminating those headaches. By creating a machine that managed its own thermal balance and asked less of its rider mechanically, Honda was appealing directly to people who wanted the adventure of the road without the maintenance ritual that often accompanied it. Micro story. The placement of the fuel tank was one of the GL1000's most unusual design choices. Instead of sitting on top of the frame where riders expected, the real tank was tucked under the seat, while the tank up front housed electronics and storage. This move lowered the bike's center of gravity, improving stability, and it gave the bike a distinctive silhouette. At first, some riders thought it was strange, even disorienting, but over time it became part of what set the Goldwing apart. It was Honda's way of saying function would define form, not the other way around. Reflection bridge. With each of these engineering choices, Honda wasn't just building a motorcycle, they were building a statement about how touring could feel, and that made people take notice. Micro story. One of the earliest road tests in America involved journalists riding the Goldwing across multiple states without a support truck. They expected the trip to highlight weaknesses, but instead the bike breezed through it, proving not only its reliability, but also its comfort. Riders talked about arriving at their destinations less tired, more relaxed, and ready to go again the next day. This simple experience of being able to travel without exhaustion reframed the Goldwing as more than a bike. It was a companion for serious journeys. Context digest. The US touring market in the mid-70s was both huge and conservative. Harley-Davidson owned the image of the heavyweight cruiser, while BMW had the serious touring crowd. For Honda to challenge both at once required a delicate balance of innovation and credibility. The GL1000 did that by not copying either style. Instead, it created a third way, a touring bike that borrowed lessons from cars, airplanes, and motorcycles alike. By carving out that space, Honda wasn't just competing, they were redefining the category. Micro story. For many riders, the shaft drive was a revelation. Chain drives required constant cleaning, lubrication, and adjustment, especially after long rides. The shaft drive on the GL1000 meant less hassle and more confidence on extended trips. One owner recalled how liberating it felt not to carry chain, oil, or worry about adjustments in the middle of nowhere. This subtle difference mattered deeply to people who measured their rides in hundreds or thousands of miles. Reflection bridge. By the end of its first year on the market, the Goldwing had not only silenced skeptics, but had also started converting riders who never thought they'd consider a Honda for serious touring. Context digest. Sales numbers confirmed the shift. The GL1000 quickly became a popular choice, especially among riders who valued practicality over brand loyalty. Clubs started forming around the bike, cross-country trips became more common, and suddenly Honda was no longer just a player in the entry-level or sport market. They had become a force in the heavyweight touring world. And that momentum created ripple effects across the industry, forcing others to respond. Micro story. Perhaps the most telling sign of the Goldwing's impact came from the accessories market. Riders began demanding windshields, saddlebags, and comfort-oriented upgrades to match the bike's long-distance potential. Small companies started producing gear specifically for the GL1000, and eventually Honda would take the hint, offering more factory touring options in future generations. The bike wasn't just meeting expectations, it was shaping new ones, telling the industry that comfort and distance mattered more than ever. And this was only the first step, because the Goldwing's journey had just begun. And what happened? Next would push its reputation even further into legend, setting the stage for an entirely new culture of motorcycling. As the Goldwing established its presence, what followed was a gradual yet unmistakable cultural shift in the way Americans viewed motorcycles. It was no longer just about leather jackets, loud pipes, and raw vibration. It was about covering, real distance and comfort without giving up the thrill of two wheels. Riders began planning longer trips, and the Goldwing was at the center of this new wave. It wasn't simply a machine, but an enabler of freedom measured not in miles per hour, but in hours of riding without fatigue. This change brought new communities together, new rivalries into focus, and new ideas about what motorcycling could be. Micro-story. By the late 1970s, the Goldwing Riders Association was founded, one of the first brand-specific communities, to form around a Japanese motorcycle. Members organized meetups, cross-country rides, and rallies, showcasing how the bike had become a social connector. At a time when most motorcycle groups were tied to either local culture or racing, the Goldwing clubs were built around shared travel experiences. Riders reported how welcoming the community was, with newcomers quickly integrated, and the bike itself became a badge of membership in this touring lifestyle. Micro-story. Rival brands watched closely. Harley-Davidson, facing its own struggles, in the 1970s began feeling pressure to modernize its touring machines. BMW, long respected for its distance capability, suddenly had competition that undercut its exclusivity. Magazine comparisons started to weigh comfort, smoothness, and reliability as heavily as styling or tradition. The Goldwing had reset the scale, and other manufacturers were forced to reconsider what counted most for buyers. For Honda, this validation meant they had stepped into a new role, not just as innovators, but as leaders shaping the whole touring segment. Context digest. The broader motorcycle industry in America during this period was fragile. The economic pressures of the oil crisis and shifting consumer habits meant sales could be unpredictable. While many companies struggled, Honda's willingness to innovate positioned them better than most. The Goldwing represented a bet that riders wanted more than short trips or flashy machines. They wanted a tool for freedom on a larger scale. That gamble proved correct, and it gave Honda a rare advantage at a time when many competitors were fighting to survive. Micro-story. Individual stories of Goldwing owners became central to its legend. One rider set out to cross the United States from coast to coast, documenting his journey on the GL1000. His letters described how he was able to ride all day through desert heat and mountain passes without worrying about mechanical breakdowns. In a decade when reliability was often in question, these real-world tales mattered more than marketing slogans. Riders trusted the experiences of other riders, and word of mouth helped cement the Goldwing's reputation as the ultimate cross-country companion. Reflection bridge. Every story of long-distance reliability built the Goldwing's myth, and every competitor who noticed had to adapt or risk being left behind. Micro-story. Accessory companies exploded in number as the Goldwing created demand for new touring gear. From luggage racks to padded backrests and massive fairings, the aftermarket saw opportunity, and riders embraced the chance to customize their machines. What began as a bare-bones motorcycle quickly became the canvas for touring luxury, and soon aftermarket parts were as important as the bike itself. This created an ecosystem around the GL1000 that extended its influence beyond Honda and into the broader motorcycle economy. Context digest. Honda noticed this trend and began to rethink what the Goldwing should be in the future. They saw how riders turned their bikes into full-fledged touring machines, complete with accessories that rivaled small cars in convenience. This feedback loop between owner behavior and manufacturer strategy was unusual at the time. Instead of resisting customization, Honda leaned into it, setting the stage for future Goldwings that would come factory-equipped with many of the features riders had been adding themselves. Micro-story. The Goldwing also played a role in changing public perception of motorcyclists. Police officers and everyday citizens who once associated bikes with noise and rebellion began to see a different image: middle-aged riders with spouses, luggage, and long-distance ambitions. The Goldwing wasn't threatening, it was aspirational. For many, it became the motorcycle that showed how two wheels could be both practical and adventurous, responsible and exhilarating. That dual identity gave it a reach few other machines ever achieved. Reflection bridge. By the end of the decade, the Goldwing was no longer just a bold experiment. It was a blueprint for the future of touring, and Honda was ready to take it further. Microstory. In 1979, Honda released the Goldwing Interstate, the first factory-equipped full-dress touring bike. It came with a fairing, saddlebags, and a trunk straight from the showroom, eliminating the need for aftermarket conversions. This move confirmed that Honda understood the market it had created and was committed to leading it. Riders who once had to piece together accessories could now buy a ready-to-tour machine, and that elevated the Goldwing from innovative oddity to the undisputed king of long-distance riding. The Goldwing had moved from experiment to institution, and the rest of the industry could only respond. And that shift set the stage for the 1980s, where the Goldwing would grow even larger, even more luxurious, and become synonymous with the very idea of touring motorcycles, leaving behind an unmistakable legacy that still defines it today. By the 1980s, the Goldwing was no longer just a motorcycle. It had become an icon of touring culture. What started in 1975 as a daring experiment had now evolved into a machine that embodied comfort, reliability, and long-distance adventure in a way few could rival. Riders didn't just buy a Goldwing, they committed to a lifestyle that revolved around endless highways, shared experiences, and the confidence that their bike could carry them wherever they wanted to go. The GL1000 had laid the foundation, and successive generations built on it, but that original spirit of redefinition never left. Microstory. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Goldwing's rise was how it attracted new demographics. Middle-aged professionals, couples who wanted to tour together, and even retirees who still craved adventure found the Goldwing perfectly suited for their needs. Stories circulated of riders who had never before considered owning a motorcycle, but chose a Goldwing because it felt approachable and safe. They could travel in comfort, bring along luggage, and still enjoy the thrill of the open road. This broadened motorcycling's appeal in America and created a new class of riders. Microstory. Long-distance rallies became the proving ground for the Goldwing's capabilities. Events like the Iron Butt Rides or cross-country charity runs featured Goldwings prominently, with riders logging tens of thousands of miles with minimal issues. The bike wasn't just praised in magazines, it was validated by the sheer endurance of those who trusted it for the toughest journeys. That credibility was priceless, and it solidified the Goldwing's status as the gold standard for touring. Context digest. The 1980s also marked a time when technology began weaving itself into motorcycles more than ever before. Honda embraced this, gradually integrating features like better suspension systems, audio equipment, and increased engine displacement. Instead of stripping the bike down for performance, Honda layered on comfort and convenience. This direction wasn't for everyone. Some riders felt it moved away from the purity of motorcycling. But for those who wanted the ultimate touring experience, it was irresistible. Microstory. One family told of riding from California to Florida on a Goldwing with a sidecar attached, their children along for the ride. It was a vacation unlike any other, blending intimacy, adventure, and freedom in ways that cars or planes couldn't replicate. Stories like these showcased how the Goldwing wasn't just for solo wanderers. It was a machine that could carry families, build memories, and redefine what a road trip could be. That sense of possibility became part of the Goldwing's DNA. Reflection. Bridge. With every year, the Goldwing wasn't just evolving mechanically, it was evolving symbolically, representing a bridge between personal freedom and shared experience. Microstory. Rival manufacturers didn't stand still. Harley-Davidson refined its Electra Glide, adding amenities and leaning into its American heritage. BMW advanced its touring models with precision engineering and a reputation for European sophistication. Yet despite the competition, the Goldwing consistently ranked as the benchmark by which all others were judged. Riders could debate style or loyalty, but when it came to long-distance capability, the Goldwing's record spoke for itself. Context digest. The Goldwing also highlighted the tension between tradition and progress. Purists who valued the simplicity of motorcycling sometimes criticized the bike's increasing size and complexity, Yet for many others, that very evolution was the point. Motorcycling didn't have to remain stuck in the past. The Goldwing represented a future where two wheels could carry as much innovation as four, and where technology could enhance rather than diminish the riding experience. Microstory. By the late 1980s, Honda had expanded the Goldwing into the 1500cc range, offering more power, more space, and even greater comfort. Riders joked that it was like piloting a two-wheeled car, but they meant it with affection. For those who embraced it, the bike's size and features were exactly what made it liberating. It proved that motorcycles didn't have to be small, raw, or minimalist to deliver freedom. They could be grand, comfortable, and indulgent, while still offering the connection to the road only two wheels provide. Reflection bridge. With its evolution into a full-dress luxury machine, the Goldwing had completed its transformation from disruptor to defining presence, and its legacy was now undeniable. Context digest. Decades later, the first-generation GL1000 remains a touchstone. Collectors and enthusiasts value its simplicity compared to later models, and it represents the purity of Honda's original idea, a touring motorcycle built to cross distances without compromise. Clubs still celebrate the early models, and restorations keep them alive as reminders of how far the Goldwing journey has come. Even in a world of advanced machines, that 1975 breakthrough still resonates as the moment everything changed. Microstory. In modern times, riders continue to take first-generation Goldwings on epic journeys, proving that the original engineering still holds up. Photos and stories of restored GL1000s crossing mountain passes or desert highways remind the community that the spirit of the road doesn't age. These stories tie the present to the past, showing that while technology moves on, the essence of touring freedom remains constant. That endurance of spirit is perhaps the greatest legacy of all. The Goldwing began as an unlikely gamble, grew into a cultural force, and now stands as one of the most influential motorcycles in history. It didn't just redefine touring, it redefined what motorcycles could mean to people, and that impact still rolls on today, mile after mile, with every rider who chooses the open road aboard a Goldwing. The Honda Goldwing GL1000 was never just about metal and mechanics. It was about rewriting the meaning of the open road. From its bold debut in 1975 to the legacy it still carries today, the Goldwing proved that motorcycles could offer something. Bigger than speed or style, they could deliver comfort, confidence, and community on a scale no one expected. By challenging conventions of design and reshaping the rider experience, Honda created a machine that invited new people into motorcycling, expanded the possibilities for long-distance travel, and set the standard for an entire category. Looking back, the GL1000's greatest achievement wasn't simply engineering innovation, but cultural transformation. It bridged gaps between tradition and progress, between solitary freedom and shared journeys, and between practicality and romance. Even as later models grew more complex, the DNA of that first-generation bike remained visible in every Goldwing that followed. It showed the world that comfort and reliability could be just as revolutionary as horsepower and speed, and that lesson continues to ripple through the touring market today. For riders who still chase horizons, the Goldwing stands as both symbol and tool, a motorcycle that makes the long road not just possible, but deeply enjoyable. And for enthusiasts reflecting on motorcycle history, it is a reminder that sometimes the boldest moves come not from amplifying tradition, but from reimagining it entirely. Thanks for riding with us on Auto Archive. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.